welcome to another episode of our series talking about handmade, historical handmade and how it changed up until today. We'll be talking about another handmade technique that you can meet in Poland. Enjoy! Today I've got a translation of an interview that was conducted by Karolina from our association Oplotki with Jadwiga Anioła, who is a folk artist. Let's dive deep into that. Well, Jadwiga is a folk artist in the field of ritual ornamentation. And since last year, she's also a president of Wielkopolska Folk Artists Branch. And she belongs to this association since 2014, and she's also a relatively young creator, very young for a president of this association. And what we're going to be talking about? We're going to be talking about kraszanki, which is a Polish name for a specifically decorated Easter eggs. So what exactly is kraszanka? It is a dyed egg. First, you need to embellish or simply dye the egg. Embellish means okraszać, hence the name, kraszanki. Then, you scratch them, and that way you create the design. You scratch off the dye to expose the original color of the egg. Okay, so which bird's eggs does Jadwiga use to make those kraszanki? She admitted she makes them from geese eggs, or blown geese eggs to be exact. She doesn't use full eggs because she wants her kraszanki to please the eye for longer time. In some homes, kraszanki are a seasonal decoration compared to, Christmas balls, kept in boxes for many years only to be taken out, during Easter time. She used to use duck eggs and used full-boiled chicken eggs to, prepare every year Easter eggs in the basket that traditionally is taken to the church for the blessing. But now, when she wants to create works of arts that last longer, she uses, those blown geese eggs. As you may assume, there are lots of different patterns to be used. And how does Jadwiga create hers? Well, she says she comes up with those patterns on the go. She doesn't copy anything. You won't find two identical eggs here. Here, meaning in her workshop in her home. There are no identical patterns because they are always different for her. And even if one wanted her to make a few eggs with the same pattern, she wouldn't agree to do that because she simply says she can't. Something always slips in her mind and sometimes something else pops up. And as she admitted, eggs are always different, never the same. When asked about tools, how does working with a blown egg look like? She said tools are quite primitive. It's just a simple potato knife, as she admitted. Often she uses a thick nail to scratch these patterns. There are also special tools in Opole, Silesia, created by men for the ladies who scratch eggs. But she said she mostly scrapes out eggs with an ordinary kitchen knife for peeling potatoes or other vegetables. And which element of preparing the kraszanka is most difficult? Is it obtaining the egg? Maybe dyeing the egg? Or maybe getting the right color then? Or maybe the tools themselves? For her, Jadwiga said that dyeing is most difficult part, because she always dyes eggs using plants. She gets dye from different plants like beetroots, periwinkle leaves, alder cones, oak bark, or onion skins, and from many combinations of all these dyes altogether. Sometimes she composes 2 or 3 different dyes. The length of coloring also influences the intensity of the final color. Usually her Easter eggs are dark. They aren't distinct in bright colors. The colors are subdued. She would even say the colors are pretty depressing and they never look that joyful, just like you see in the Easter baskets. But those are her colors. They,
are colors that are created by nature plants. So these are not just like colorful birds. And Jadwiga admitted that the darker the shell is dyed and the more it soaks in the dye, the prettier the pattern gets, because the scratched pattern is always white. But she sometimes scratches more shallow to uncover, those dye coatings. So some of her kraszanki have this shading you won't see on other Easter eggs. Over the years, when Jadwiga was scratching kraszanki, because, people were scratching kraszanki for centuries, was there anything that changed in the technique that we can say, there's something new or some upgrade that she has made? Well, Jadwiga admitted that she hasn't changed a thing. She didn't introduce any modernity. She's this type of manufacturer, as she says, from the olden days, and she doesn't change anything and doesn't improve anything. As far as she knows, people change and improve tools, but she's tough stand on her rule, never to change. There is one fact that takes a lot of time, because to make such a nice kraszanka, you have to spend 5 or 6 hours. So she thinks there's maybe a room for upgrade there, but 3 hours at least for dyeing and 2 or 3 hours for scratching, and this must be a properly prepared egg. So this is the time you spend on one kraszanka. It's a great job, amazing concentration, activated imagination. Sometimes one, when creating those kraszankas, counts the lines. Jadwiga admitted she does it very often. She starts scratching and counting. And she gets to 60 and the petal is done. It's like training, very good for old people, as Jadwiga says, because they practice memory. You have to count the petals, count the flowers, not to make a mistake. You don't necessarily need to make the same pattern on the other side of the egg, but the point is to focus on a given pattern. Focus and count intensely. Such counting is really good for you. That is, as we always say in Oplotki, that handicraft is simply developing, helpful, in stimulating for the mind and for the body. Well, Jadwiga ran a lot of classes for children in schools. She had classes with disabled people as well, with autism or other disabilities, like physical disabilities. And she admits they are great to work with. Amazing. You can see that those people find a different goal in scratching the egg, which doesn't look like, the master ones, but the whole process of making the disabled concentrate on what they're doing is beneficial. They have a great respect for the teacher as well, and they can show the joy of the process. Elderly people, as Jadwiga admitted, are also great to work with. She can't say it's not that great to work with children, of course. Working with children is also nice, as he said. They are joyful and fun to be around. Kids get out the most from those classes because their brains are the most receptive. And sometimes after many years, one of them just comes on the street and says, "Yeah, I used to make eggs with you. I remember having my hands dirty, scratching the eggs, and I have mine to this day, right? My mom kept it safe for me." So that's something that pleases Jadwiga a lot. Such nice memories. She even admitted one memory. She couldn't remember when she started making the eggs, but she remembers that was the time when she was young. Her grandmother scratched eggs, and she remembered they always had them at home. They weren't geese eggs, and she doesn't have any patterns that, her grandma used to make, but she made them for the basket, for this, blessing on Easter. And Jadwiga remembers this big bowl from, their best dishware that her grandmother put on the table and dyed the eggs in onion skins on the stove. Her grandmother would, bring the winter grains for her to dye the eggs in different colors. She took the potato knife, just like, Jadwiga does today, stood by the stove and scratched those warm eggs and put them in a bowl. Jadwiga said they always had beautiful scratched eggs on Easter, especially. And that was something normal for her, that they are just like a must. Then she started scratching eggs when she got married and her child was little and she had to have a kraszanka for basket. It was a normal thing for her. Then she started scratching geese eggs. The first ones were blown eggs for their table, just to decorate the table. And then she made some for a present for her family and friends. And she never, did it to earn money. She always made it with passion from her heart, and eggs were different. Each was different. She always told that to choose whichever the egg given person would like, and that was a spontaneous gift or present. And that's how it started for her. And she made more and more and more and got totally absorbed in this passion. She was doing something, but she didn't know that it was a technique of egg ornamentation. Only after she met with an ethnographer from museum in Dziekanowice, she was asked, where did she learn it? Who told her how to do it? And she just, Jadwiga found out that that was the oldest Eastern eggs ornamentation. And this is how people used to dye eggs in the olden days. And she basically changed nothing. So she kept it the way it was. So she decided that for as long as she's going to scratch eggs, she will dye them in such a way to always know that they are hers, like from the ancestors. All her kraszanki are signed by her, and she always knows which is her kraszanka. She remembers each one. As she admitted, she remembers each and every single one she has ever made, though scratched thousands of them. She recognizes them wherever she goes. It's just like, remembering your children, right? So Jadwiga admitted, you'll always remember your children because there is something different in each of them. And just like them, those kraszanki sometimes have stains, deficiencies, some strange discoloration, there is a little bump somewhere, or the shell is not just a perfect shell. And it was created by nature, as she says. A goose laid it, so each one is different. Each goose is different, each egg is different. And in these very discolorations, shortcomings, you discover the coolest, most important, and beautiful eggs. Because they have these natural, discolorations. You don't need to paint them. They are already perfectly painted by nature. That's the beauty of handicraft. And I guess we all know it, that each piece is different. Sometimes, it's just like with a real painter, as Jadwiga said. A real painter doesn't paint two identical pictures, and I guess it's the same in the case of her Easter eggs. When asked about whether there are some people, apart from children or, elderly that she works with them on her workshops, who want to know how to create kraszanki, she admitted she met a lot of people that wanted to learn. Not all of them are predisposed to do so, as she says, but many of them have abilities or skills, but they don't have the patience. She admitted that among many, many children that she was teaching in schools or preschools, kindergartens, there was only one girl that she remembers that, used to stick with this egg in her hand even long after the workshop was over. And she was really focused on one egg. Mastering this skill of focus seems to be the hardest things nowadays. Not only for kids, but for grown-ups too. And, when asked about other things from kraszanki, apart from kraszanki, Jadwiga is also skilled in different things. She also makes, she admitted she's just like a one-man band because, she lives according to the seasons of the year. So for Easter, she makes those Easter eggs. Ritual bread, Easter palms, blotting paper flowers, straw products, harvest wreaths for, end of summer. And she also remembers some folk herbalism from her home, and she does all sorts of things depending on the season, like, calendar for winter. So she lives just like the calendar goes. And she also does some Christmas decoration, also from the straw. And that's one thing worth remembering, that straw brings us luck. So that's something, that we tend to forget in this, plastic world of decoration for Christmas. And I hope that this conversation brought you to ideas about handmade things that we do, not only for the handmade sake. It seems that kraszanki is a thing that we do for Easter. And it's, quite popular that we cultivate those, Easter baskets and we go to the church for the blessing. And maybe some thought that I could plant in your mind that thinking about those, olden day methods, simple methods of dyeing eggs and then scratching them in order to create a pattern could be the most fancy one as well. So I hope that I've encouraged you to dig deeper into this topic. I invite you to listen to the original interview in our Monday episode and also to jump into our materials on the website dedicated to this project. I hope I see you in the next episode.